Hello everyone, in this series I'll be analysing every weapon in TF2 in every slot for every class to try and determine the best weapons and loadout combinations. Now, I felt that a normal tier list was too limiting, so I designed my own format to make things more accurate. It should allow for different levels based on different circumstances, in addition to a weapon's overall quality. Weapons I consider to be the best will be recommended, weapons which have a better alternative in almost every situation will be rejected, and great weapons which aren't quite the best will be unacceptable. Everything in unacceptable I consider to be a bad weapon, so even though these two here are the same colour, rejected weapons aren't bad, it's just that it's another weapon clearly better than it overall. Weapons with a gold outline I find to be used by the best players, and it'll have a little arrow to show whether a weapon is clearly better or worse than its equivalent. Often the default weapon is the equivalent, but every now and again you get weapons with similar stats and similar overall function to each other. Now, actually determining what weapons and combinations are the best can be quite tricky, because you gotta look at various things. You gotta see how well it kills the enemy, how well it protects you, and how well it supports your team. You also have to look at the weapon's overall versatility. So what does it allow you to do, and what does it prevent you from doing? Is it the best in general, or only under rare circumstances? So there are many things to consider. First up is the default Scattergun, which I would consider to be the best and most reliable primary weapon for Scout. The longer an engagement with the enemy, the better this weapon becomes in comparison to others. It's the only primary with 6 shots, so the damage output is consistently the highest of the weapons on this list. Missing a shot with any of the other weapons is worse than missing with the default Scattergun, because of the damage output in relation to the reload. The only possible exception to this is the Soda Popper. Looking at the increased attack speed and reload speed and compare it to the Scattergun, when you run the numbers, the Soda Popper does noticeably more damage in a shorter period of time than a Scattergun, because it can get those 2 shots off extremely fast. But if you don't kill what you're trying to kill by the time you need to reload, then the Scattergun is better if you have at least 3 or more in the clip. Until you need to reload with it, then the Soda Popper becomes better again. Only if you hit all your shots, that's the important part. So there's less room for error with the Soda Popper, but it is one of the best weapons when used at the highest level. Another example of this is the weapon's hype ability, which gives you 5 extra air jumps in 8 seconds, allowing you to hover above the enemy, constantly dodging, constantly firing down, and it makes it very difficult for them to hit you in the sky if you know how to properly do it. Even though the Soda Popper is probably better at the highest level, most of the time I see high skill players use the default Scattergun, but the lower skill players always using the Soda Popper. They run in, fire both shots that hit absolutely nothing, then die instantly. Now, outside of the Scattergun, I have seen some really good players with the Force of Nature as well, which is 100% the most fun scout weapon to use. About to get market gunned? Just say no thank you. Pyros, Demonites, that one medic with a crazy look in his eye running at you with the Ubersaw, just send them back to hell. The knockback on this weapon means you can avoid any melee engagements if you use it correctly. Now, although it doesn't have the same overall damage output as the Scattergun or the Soda Popper, it is the best weapon to use in situations where the knockback is going to be more beneficial than just the straight damage. So sending an enemy flying to their death is mainly what I'm thinking of. Now, the Force of Nature and the Soda Popper are pretty much equivalent, so when comparing their stats, it does sort of seem that the Soda Popper is better overall. You got that 25% increased reload speed with the Soda Popper, and the Force of Nature has more bullets with less damage, which means that's slightly worse at slightly longer ranges. Also, due to the way damage works in the game, the closer you are to the enemy, the more damage you do as a percentage increase, and this modifier is even higher for Scout. So 2 quick shots with the Force of Nature is going to do less damage than 2 shots with the Soda Popper, because with the Force of Nature, you're going to be knocking the enemy back with that first shot. This damage reduction can be offset if you're knocking them into a wall or a corner, but that's not going to happen in most fights. Now, although the Force of Nature is not the best at the highest level, there is a lot of versatility with it. You're able to jump around and knock the enemy back, so there is a lot of benefit there, just not fully with damage. It's not a clear downgrade overall to the Soda Popper, I wouldn't say that, because it does have a lot of situational use, especially with mobility. The Shortstop, on the other hand, has a smaller clip, does 20% less damage per shot, and on top of that, does 25% less damage at point blank range compared to all other Scout primary weapons. Now, the game doesn't tell you how much damage you're missing in the item description, but it also doesn't tell you the significant positives of the weapon either. It has 40% higher accuracy, making it the best Scout primary at medium range and above. It also has 40% faster firing speed, making it deal damage noticeably faster than the default Scattergun at point blank. So you're trading about 30% less damage at point blank for 40% faster firing. It means you're still able to kill low health classes in 2 shots, and when you've fired all 4, that's essentially the same damage as 3 shots from the Scattergun, but just slightly faster. Now you'd think that the massive damage loss and clip size reduction would make it a bad weapon, but the accuracy and speed I do think make up for it. It's still weaker at closer ranges, which is where the scout should be, but it's possible to fully utilize the strength of the weapon with a medium range scout build. You're still able to fulfill the scout's role as an annoying little shit, but now at a distance. I also did some testing with the Criticola since I realized that mini crits don't have damage drop off. So 40% more accuracy means you can kinda snipe with the Shortstop. Here's me dishing out around 150 damage to a heavy at medium range. Every shot can get you 16 damage for low accuracy and 49 damage for high accuracy. Very rarely can you get the full 65 damage like this here, but the point is that Criticola can make the Shortstop extremely deadly at a distance, so I would highly recommend it, especially if you're a sniper main who accidentally clicked on the scout for some reason. Now moving on to the back scatter, which by looking at the stats seems to be a direct downgrade from the default Scattergun. It's got a smaller clip, wider bullet spread, and with no random critical hits, which basically just means less damage overall, especially when moving from point blank to close range because of that wider bullet spread. The only positive to this weapon is the mini crits you get from hitting an enemy point blank in the back. It does about 40 damage more than the default Scattergun, which is enough to kill all low health classes in a single hit. The problem is that most of the time you won't need it. You're given an advantage for an engagement you're most likely going to win anyway. It can be quite fun to use, but losing a third of your clip is going to be worse for damage output overall. It's a downgrade, but it isn't a bad weapon. There is situational use, there is ambushing capabilities. If an enemy is fighting one of your teammates, you can come at them from the side to try and get a mini crit by flanking them, so there is strategy there. Lastly is the Baby Faces Blaster, which I've never said out loud before. Okay. The Blaster gives you speed for dealing damage, up to 173% the base, which is the fastest you can get in the game. Except it's really annoying to use because you lose all of your boost the second you jump in the air or take any damage at all. So you've got a smaller clip, worse mobility because you start with minus 10% speed and can't double jump. The second you go into any engagement with the enemy, you lose the only positive this weapon has, since 25 damage is all it takes. So no, this is not a good weapon. The rapid speed changes take a while to adjust to, so you have to have a higher skill in order to aim at a faster speed. And also while you're dropping in speed from being hit and getting the speed back, it's quite annoying. The only time you should be using it is if you have the Guillotine and Ramp Assassin, so you can get the speed boost with range damage and bleed damage. It compensates for some of the downsides, but doesn't make the weapon any good, because you still lose all the speed if you get hit at a medium range. Oh, and one of the worst things about this weapon is when you're fighting an enemy at close range and you lose the speed boost. So now you're at minus 10% speed on a class with low health that is supposed to be good at mobility. It makes it much easier for the enemy to hit you and makes it much harder for you to dodge or to escape. Okay, I think that's everything for this section. One final note is that the Shortstop doesn't get a downgrade arrow because I think it's more comparable to a pistol rather than a shotgun. Now, when I was doing my research for this section, I came across something very interesting. It seems that the Pretty Boys Pocket Pistol doesn't have an increased 15% firing speed. From looking at the wiki, it seems that it's 10%, not 15%. If it's 15, then that means it can fire all 9 bullets of its clip, while the default pistol can only fire 7. If it's only 10%, then the default pistol will be able to shoot 8. In order to verify this, we need to have a visual speed comparison between the two, and I managed to find one on the official Valve weapon demonstration. Both weapons start firing at the same time, and when the pocket pistol runs out, the default pistol still has 4 bullets remaining. So the stock has fired 8, and the pocket pistol has fired 9. And for some reason, whoever was doing the demonstration, I think, missed their last shot, or there was some sort of visual bug, because the pocket pistol should have done more damage here. So if the wiki's correct and the demonstration's correct, then that means you're only getting 1 faster shot for 3 less in the clip, which is slightly worse for damage output overall. Now this weapon also heals you 3 HP per hit, so hitting with most of your clip will give you roughly 18 to 21 HP back, which isn't that significant, but it can save you in certain situations like with Afterburn, or getting hit with the SMG, or with another pistol. So when you're up against really fast, low damage, then this weapon can be the difference between life or death, which is definitely worth losing a bit of damage for. So both weapons are solid. One is more defensive and the other is more offensive, but they are exactly what you want in a secondary. Now, for all you winger fans out there, please jump off this video with your increased height because it is a garbage weapon. You can maybe do one more bullet's worth of damage at point blank range if you hit every shot, but you're missing out on 7 bullets in a clip, so it ain't worth it. Look, killing the enemy is better than jumping higher. More mobility is only good if it contributes to faster killing. This does not. So moving on to an actual weapon, the Flying Guillotine. This is very fun to use and one of the only scout weapons effective at all ranges with no damage drop off for medium and long range. It does 90 damage in total with the bleed, which is almost the equivalent to a point blank scattergun shot. Plus the bleed effect can slightly disorientate the enemy, which may worsen the aim a little. It's perfect against a single target, primarily as you're closing distance or retreating from them, but the main issue with this weapon is how valuable it is. You've only got one throw, so then you've essentially got a 5-second reload for 0 benefit if you miss. When missing at close and medium range, it's like losing 5 to 10 pistol shots worth of damage all at once, not to mention the loss in damage potential when you compare the Guillotine's recharge to the pistol's reload. I would still definitely recommend this weapon though, because of its massive damage output on a hit and its effectiveness at any range. But personally, I'd still prefer the pistol for reliability and also fighting sentries, because I've tried throwing a cleaver at a sentry and it just makes it angrier. However, there is a weapon on this list which a sentry hates more than any other, and that is the Bonk Atomic Punch. This weapon gives you 8 seconds of damage immunity, while also not being able to deal any damage. Its practical use is rather limited because it takes a second to drink, which is a spare second you quite often don't have in a firefight. While fighting at close to medium range, you might be able to escape by ducking around a corner to drink the bonk in time. Another situation is when you need to cross an active battlefield to get to safety and you know you won't survive fighting through it, so that 8 seconds can save you if you don't get followed. But the best use of this weapon is for distracting sentries, since you're able to run to a sentry nest with invulnerability and draw the sentry's fire for 8 seconds. This could be the window of opportunity for your team to make a push and break the nest if timed correctly. But that's the main problem with this weapon, the timing. If you get caught fighting an enemy when your bonk runs out, then it gets you killed 9 times out of 10 due to the slowdown effect. So it takes a good amount of skill to properly time that invincibility, skill which is better often used to avoid situations that need invincibility in the first place. Every other scout secondary is more reliable than the bonk, so I have to say it's a bad weapon overall, even with its situational use. The scout is the wrong class for breaking a sentry nest with. It's possible, but 100 times out of 10, running in with the bonk will kill you, and I'm pretty sure you'd make better use of the other scout secondaries instead. Now next up is the Criticolor, which pretty much just gives you 35% more damage for 8 seconds on either your primary or your melee, but since the melee on scout is pointless, effective use should really only be on a primary. But since the Criticolor also increases damage taken by 35% when you fire your first shot, you want to make sure you kill the target before they even get an opportunity to hit you, which means the Soda Popper and the Force Nature are going to be the best weapons for this, and also the Shortstop at longer ranges as I talked about before. So you're buffing your primary at the cost of losing a damage dealing secondary, and also crippling yourself for 5 seconds with that 35% damage taken. Because you gotta understand how awful that mark for death is. Receiving mini crits on Scout is way worse than the benefit of dealing mini crits. So this weapon is good if you don't get hit. Any use has to be a rapid engagement against a single target and nothing else, or at least targets you can kill in quick succession safely. It's hard to know where to place this because it's so skill dependent, and it's actively harmful if you use it poorly, so I think this is probably best. Lastly is the Mad Milk, which is one of the only scout support weapons, being able to fire spies, extinguish burning teammates, and coat enemies in a non-milk substance for 10 seconds, which grants 60% of the damage dealt back to you and your teammates as health. Now, it does weaken you because it replaces a damage-dealing secondary, but can significantly buff your team if it goes all over, splashes onto... Look, if it can hit the enemy at the right time, then it can be extremely effective, provided your team can actually aim. Although in a direct firefight, it is sort of a negative for you. since if you have time to throw it and switch to your primary, then that's time you could have just used shooting them or throwing the guillotine. And when you empty the clip on your primary, you have no damage dealing secondary to back you up. So offensively, it's not bad, but you're kneecapping yourself. However, if you're using it defensively or for support, then it's the best thing ever. If you can aim, obviously. Now, as we all know, I pride myself on being completely fair and unbiased in my analysis. However, there is perhaps a weapon here that I have never not used. The Scout is designed to be in close combat, and its primary weapon is extremely dangerous at point blank range, which makes pretty much any melee entirely useless in comparison. Unless it gives you ranged capabilities. That's right, I'm talking about the only good Scout weapon here, the Sandman. No, it's 100% the Rapid Assassin. This weapon is perfect for a first strike as you're closing distance towards an enemy, since it deals between 59 and 79 damage on a hit when including the bleed. It's also perfect at long range as well, since if it has an airtime of at least 1 second, then the initial collision will be a crit, dealing between 89 and 109 damage, making it essentially the Guillotine. So it's fantastic at any range for any Scout loadout in general. The default bat, on the other hand, is useless. It may be fast, but you'll deal damage faster by reloading your gun and shooting them. The Sandman loses you health and fires a ball that doesn't slow the enemy long enough for you to close the distance, so it deals less damage and has a longer recharge than a certain other alternative for less benefit. Abysmal. Terrible. Awful. Candy Cane. It's one of the only Scout support weapons, since it drops a small health pack when you kill the enemy. This can be quite helpful for other players. Oh, what's that? A grenade? Terrible. Boston Basher can be good for building Ubercharge, and it can be funny to jump some fool after drinking the Criticola, but the bleed does not stack. And if you're tiptoeing around the self-damage, then you're missing out on a lot of damage potential by not taking out your gun and shooting them. Bad. But better than stock. Son of Stick. You get a damage reduction overall, but crits against burning players. Fantastic. But have you tried shooting them? You do get some fire resistance though, so if you're worried about afterburn, then this weapon does have a use. Just not as much as shooting the pyro. Fan of War. This puts mini crits on one enemy for 15 seconds when you hit them, but if you're close enough to hit them, then you're close enough to shoot them. Using the Fan of War then dealing damage is not as good as just dealing damage to begin with. Now there is a key exception with this. It can be a very useful support against an extremely difficult single target. So an overhealed heavy, a good Dead Ringer spy, or a Demo Knight zooming around with 20 heads. That 35% more damage on them for 15 seconds can really help your team take down the main threat, and you just shooting them is not going to work on its own. Ideally in those situations you need to keep your distance and harass the main threat at a range, or try to overwhelm them from multiple angles. Running up to them with the Fan of War is near guaranteed to kill you, and not at all guaranteed you'll actually make it close enough to even hit them. It's potentially useful for this specific situation, but the Rap Assassin is still significantly more reliable here, since you'll probably be more use if you don't sacrifice yourself, although it's still an upgrade to the bat, I'd say. Lastly is the Atomizer, which gives you a free third jump when you have it deployed, but again, increased mobility is only useful if it contributes to increased offensive capabilities, and you got the perfect Scout melee right here. You could be hitting people with Christmas ornaments, but instead you're jumping somewhere slightly easier. Now, that third jump is not bad, and the weapon's use is not actually for fighting, so I can't say it's bad overall. But if you were trying to use it in combat, then you're making a big mistake, because in the air you should be shooting the enemy, not hitting them for mini crits. Okay, that's all the Scout weapons. I've got some final notes here before moving on to the loadout combinations. I can't really recall the best players using any specific melee here, or even any secondary in the previous section, since they tend to just demolish everything in their path with the primary. I was also thinking about this one specific use for the Sunno Stick, where you team up with a Shortstop Pyro, since to make full use of this weapon you'd want something that deals consistent afterburn in a wide area, so you can run in with a Sunno Stick and dish out major damage faster than the Scattergun can, and before your Pyro friend arrives with a flamethrower. Combining it again with a Mad Milk could also help you survive going up against multiple players, and it also helps your Pyro friend by getting the Scorch Shot to heal them. This works in theory, I haven't tested it, but I'm pretty confident in the idea. Last section is the loadout combinations for Scout. Now I won't be doing every single weapon, but I will be doing loadout combinations that make sense to me in some sort of strategy or specific playstyle. It might be only 2 weapons, maybe multiple options. Rarely a combo could even involve another player, like I just mentioned with this here. This section won't have any text or ranking splits for situational use, so it'll be entirely on a combo's overall effectiveness. For example, and to start off, the Soda Popper Criticola combo is recommended even though both of these weapons are quite skill dependent, and so just as easily could be unacceptable for low skill. This here is the ultimate glass cannon loadout for Scout. One shot would kill any low health class, and 2 shots point blank will kill anything except a heavy. The faster reload on the Soda Popper means you'll be doing more mini crit damage overall than any other primary while the Criticola is active. So it's the combo that hits the fastest and the hardest. I definitely recommend if you don't plan on getting hit ever. You could add the Fan of War onto this for a full mini crit combo, but use of the Fan of War detracts from the Soda Popper's damage output, making this a noticeable downgrade. Well, it depends on how much you use the fan, so this combo could really be placed anywhere. If you switch the Soda Popper out for the Force of Nature, you get an interesting combo with the highest damage potential per shot. That full 150 damage just surpasses the Soda Popper by allowing you to kill a medic in 1 hit and a heavy in 2 hits, so long as you have 100% accuracy point blank. But once you need to reload, then the Soda Popper is noticeably better with that 25% increased reload speed, allowing more use of the Criticola while it's active. So this is definitely great, but just not the best for overall damage output in most engagements. Running the Shortstop with a Criticola allows you to be surprisingly dangerous at medium or long range, since the weapon's 40% more accuracy stacks really well with the lack of damage drop-off from mini crits. It's the best long-range combo for Scout, so you should really include the Rap Assassin with it. Overall, I definitely recommend, but there's always significant risk from the Mark for Death, as well as the lack of damage output at point blank. But if you're using this carefully at a range and around corners, then you can offset a lot of the risk. Another unique playstyle is with the Boston Basher. This combo puts mini crits on both your hits and your bleed, which includes on yourself if you miss. This is very fun, but you are not coming back alive. This is the most glass cannon you can be with emphasis on the glass. If bleed stacked from the same source, then I would definitely put this higher, but it's simply too dangerous to be practical. The Basher could instead be combined with the Guillotine, since the bleed does stack from 2 different sources. 1 hit of each will do 165 damage in total, but the main problem here is that you're using the Boston Basher instead of the Scattergun, since it's an either-or situation. Although it should be noted that hitting with the Guillotine then with the Basher does give you an increased critical hit chance on the melee. So if I'm reading the wiki correct, then the crit chance will become roughly 1 in 5, assuming the Guillotine is the only other damage you've dealt. This combo is less risky and more practical than with the Criticola, but the risk is still way too high overall for something a gun does better. If you run the Rap Assassin instead, then it supplements the primary rather than replacing it. This is the ideal range scout loadout, since the bleed stacks and there's no damage drop off for either. It works with pretty much any primary since the combo is just as good at close range. The difference in recharge between the Guillotine and Rap Assassin actually works to your benefit since you can juggle them in a firefight, going from Scattergun to Guillotine, then Scattergun to Rap Assassin, and repeat. Having the Shortstop in the combo does make the weapon better, as I said before, while having the Face Blaster in it does not. The Face Blaster is still garbage, but this combo is good enough to negate some of the downsides of that weapon, since you can gain speed really easily at a range from the bleed. Moving on to the supportive and defensive loadouts, you can combine the Man Milk with the Candy Cane so you can get healing from both injuring and killing the enemy, which also applies to your team as well. I almost want to put this in Rejected for support, but dying instantly to any close range explosive kinda removes any positive the weapon has. Same goes for the Pocket Pistol and Candy Cane. A combo that stacks self-healing doesn't exactly help you when a single grenade sends you to the Shadow Realm. You can maybe offset some risk by using the Shortstop in either of these combos, allowing you to fight at a slightly longer range and have more time to dodge the explosives of instant death, but I still don't think it's good enough. Going full support with the Man Milk and Fan of War is a viable combo, since the use of the melee here is to support your team with mini crits, which definitely stacks well with the healing from the milk. It's good, but I still think that just killing the enemy is better for support. Combining the Mad Milk with the Sound Stick is the main combo for a defensive / anti-pyro loadout, which means you probably also want the Shortstop or Force of Nature, since either can be defensive in different ways. I almost want to put this in acceptable, but since the Scout is an offensive class, a defensive loadout I've found to be worse for overall effectiveness. Defending against a pyro is not as good as killing the pyro, so this loadout is good for surviving, but not for fighting. You could also switch the milk out for the Pocket Pistol, making this combo less supportive and more offensive, but you're still using the Sound Stick instead of celebrating Christmas. Next, if you want to do a full mobility loadout, then you could use the Force of Nature, Winger, and Atomizer. The combo of these 3 makes traversing terrain the easiest it can be as Scout, except you only really need one of them, and that being the Force of Nature. It's not a bad loadout even with the Winger, but it's an unnecessary one. I've also found that the Winger and Atomizer do not work very well together because of that long deploy time on the Atomizer, but the third jump can prevent full damage in some situations if you switch fast enough. Alternatively, the Soda Popper and Winger is potentially the best you can get for mobility if you deal enough damage, since that 25% increased jump height stacks with each of the 5 extra air jumps from the hype ability. But again, you don't need that much mobility, and the Winger holds you back overall. The Ramp Assassin is also ideal on this loadout so you can build hype at a range, and despite the item set having the Atomizer, that weapon does not give you an extra jump with the hype, so it's entirely useless here. Next is the stock Scattergun and pistol, which I probably should have done at the start of this list. Anyway, it has the highest reliable damage output of any scout combo, since they both have the largest clip of their respective sections. Fast and with consistently high damage, this is my go-to loadout, especially when adding on the Ramp Assassin. If you use the Soda Popper and Pocket Pistol instead, then it stacks the fastest firing speed in both their sections rather than clip size. You like shooting fast, and I respect that. Recommended. Now, I saved the best for last. If you're playing Scout and decide you wanted the worst possible combo imaginable, then you should use all the slowdown weapons together. The Face Blaster, Bonk, and Sandman. You'd want to combine weapons with no overall use that together also have no use. The Face Blaster is clearly the worst primary, the Bonk is the only secondary that cannot deal damage or heal, and the Sandman does nothing except lose you health. Now you might realise, wait, if I max out the speed on the Face Blaster, then I can travel longer with the Bonk's invulnerability. Yes, but do what with it? Once the Bonk runs out, you still have the worst loadout for fighting. Plus the slowdown effect from the Bonk ignores the speed boost you have on the Face Blaster, so you still sit and duck for 5 seconds. I thought about the Candy Cane being worse, but that minus 15 HP on the Sandman hurts when going up against anything, not just explosives. Plus when you slow the enemy with the ball, you might want to try closing the distance to attack them, at which point they'll get their speed back, you'll lose all your boost after getting hit, and then you have the fun challenge of fighting with a clip of only 4 and a health of only 110. Perfect. Never use this. That's all for this video on everything Scout. I spent way too much time overanalyzing every single little thing like normal, and learnt tons of stuff that I really didn't need to. If I made any mistakes or changed my mind about anything, then I'll put it in the description. See ya.